Fleet Admiral Zorax Dunn leaned back in his command chair, tentacles twitching with annoyance as he studied the latest casualty reports. The numbers scrolled endlessly across his holographic display, each digit representing another Galactic Union soldier lost to the relentless Ricari Dominion. "Wonderful. Absolutely fantastic," he muttered, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just what we needed." Another 3 cruisers obliterated and 4,000 more troops vaporized. The High Council will be thrilled. His second in command, Sub-Commander Phyla Tan, hovered nervously beside him. Her translucent skin pulsed with anxious blue patterns. "Sir, the Council has scheduled an emergency session in 2 hours. They are requesting your presence." Zorax let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan. "Of course they are. Nothing like getting your tentacles slapped by 12 ancient bureaucrats who haven't seen actual combat in 3 centuries. The massive Galactic Union flagship, Eternal Vigilance, hummed softly around them as it orbited the sanctuary world of Haven 6. Through the viewport, Zorax could see the planet below, a beautiful blue-green orb that had somehow remained untouched by the brutal war that had engulfed the galaxy for the past 17 years. "What are our options, Sub-Commander?" Zorax asked, already knowing the answer. Phyla's skin darkened to a deep purple. "Sir, at current attrition rates, the Union forces will be depleted below sustainable levels within 8 months. The Ricari have adapted to all our tactical innovations. They now predict our maneuvers with 89.7% accuracy. And our strategic analysts? What brilliant suggestions do they have? They recommend immediate peace negotiations, sir." Zorax slammed all 4 of his appendages onto the console. "Surrender? After 17 years? After losing 23 billion citizens?" His voice rose to a thunderous roar. "The Ricari don't negotiate. They consume. They expand. They destroy. Have our so-called experts forgotten what happened at the Rigel colonies?" The memory of Rigel still haunted him. 6 billion civilians transformed into nothing but atomic particles and cosmic dust when the Ricari deployed their planet cracker weapons. No warning. No demands. Just cold, methodical annihilation. Phyla flinched but held her ground. "There is one other option, Admiral. Project Guardian." The command deck went silent. Even the junior officers, pretending not to eavesdrop, froze at their stations. Project Guardian was shut down. Zorax said quietly, "By my direct order." "Yes, sir." But Director Mila Javix continued the research in secret. "She believes they have had a breakthrough." Zorax's facial ridges contracted in a frown. "The ethical implications alone." "Sir," Phyla interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We are losing this war. If Haven 6 falls, there's nothing between the Ricari and the core worlds. 80 billion more lives at stake." For several long seconds, Zorax stared at the casualty report still hovering before him. Then, with a sharp gesture of his primary tentacle, he dismissed the display. "Send a secure transmission to Director Javix. Eyes only. Tell her I'm coming to see this breakthrough." Director Mila Javix was waiting when Zorax's shuttle touched down at the remote research facility buried deep within Haven 6's northern continent. Unlike most galactics, Javix was mammalian, covered in short amber fur with 6 limbs and triple-pupiled eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Admiral," she greeted him, extending her primary hands in the traditional gesture of respect. "Thank you for coming. I understand your skepticism, but I believe what we have accomplished will change everything." Zorax didn't bother with pleasantries. "You disobeyed a direct order, Director. Give me one reason why I shouldn't have you court-martialed immediately." Javix's expression didn't change. "Because in about 20 minutes, you are going to thank me for my insubordination. Follow me, please." The facility was a maze of sterile corridors and secure doors, each requiring increasingly complex biometric authentication. Whatever Javix was hiding, she'd gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it secret. "As you know," she explained as they walked, Project Guardian was established to find strategic advantages against the Ricari. We explored everything: new weapons systems, defense technologies, even biological countermeasures, and psychological warfare, Zorax added pointedly, which crossed every ethical boundary in the Union Charter. Desperate times, Admiral. Javix stopped at a final security door. But what we discovered went far beyond our initial parameters. We found something unexpected. The door slid open to reveal what looked like a standard observation room. A large one-way view screen dominated the far wall, showing a comfortable living space on the other side. Seated at a desk, studying something on a datapad, was a bipedal creature with pinkish-tan skin and a patch of dark hair on top of its head. A human? Zorax couldn't hide his confusion. Your big breakthrough is a human. Their planet was destroyed in the first year of the war. There are barely 10,000 of them left in the entire galaxy, most living as refugees. Javix's eyes gleamed with barely contained excitement. Not just any human, Admiral. This is Jason Vale. He was 8 years old when Earth was destroyed. Both parents were killed. He was rescued by a Union evacuation ship and placed in an orphan care facility on Proxima Colony. Zorax studied the human with renewed interest. The specimen appeared to be a young adult male, perhaps in his mid-20s by human standards. Physically unremarkable, average height and build for his species. Nothing to suggest any special abilities. So he's a war orphan. What makes him valuable to the war effort? At age 12, he was identified by our scouts and brought into the Project Guardian program. Javix continued. We had a theory that certain species might possess unique cognitive abilities that could be enhanced. Zorax's tentacles curled with distaste. You experimented on a child. We educated him, Javix corrected sharply. We trained him. And yes, we augmented certain natural abilities. But everything was done with appropriate care. And what abilities might those be? Javix gestured to a neural display showing complex brain patterns. Humans have an extraordinary capacity for what they call lateral thinking, making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. They are also remarkably adaptable, capable of functioning in environments that would kill most species. I'm aware of human resilience, Director. That's hardly revolutionary. No, but this is. Javix activated a holographic projector in the center of the room. A complex three-dimensional battle simulation appeared, Union forces engaged with Vakari battle groups across a contested star system. 6 months ago, we began testing Jason's strategic capabilities using historical battles. This simulation represents the Battle of Antares Gateway, one of our worst defeats. 47 Union vessels lost against a smaller Vakari force. Zorax watched as the simulation played out, showing the disastrous Union tactics that had led to the massacre. Now watch what happens when we gave the same starting conditions to Jason. But the simulation reset. This time the Union forces moved differently, splitting into unconventional formations, using the gravity wells of nearby planets in ways Zorax had never considered. The result was staggering, a complete reversal, with minimal Union losses and the Vakari forces in full retreat. One battle could be luck, Javix said. So we ran 300 historical scenarios. Jason achieved victory in 287 of them. The 13 defeats? All situations where Union forces were outnumbered at least 8-1. Zorax's mind raced. You are suggesting we put a human, a 25-year-old human with no actual combat experience, in charge of our entire war effort? I'm suggesting we put the most brilliant military mind we have ever encountered in charge of our war effort, Javix corrected. Species is irrelevant. The High Council will never accept it. The High Council is out of options. Javix's voice hardened. You said it yourself, Admiral. We are losing this war. 8 months until total collapse. What do you have to lose? Before Zorax could respond, the human, Jason Vale, looked up directly at the view screen. Despite knowing it was impossible for the human to see them through the one-way glass, Zorax felt a chill run down his spine as those dark eyes seemed to stare right through him. He knows we are here, Zorax said quietly. Javix nodded. He always does. Would you like to meet him? Jason Vale stood as Zorax and Javix entered his living quarters. Up close, the human was even less impressive, shorter than Zorax by at least 30 centimeters, with none of the natural weapons or defenses that most species evolved with. No claws, no armored hide, no venom glands, just soft skin and dull teeth. The only remarkable feature was his eyes, dark and intensely focused. Admiral Zorax Dunn, Jason said, his voice surprisingly deep for such a small creature, fleet commander of the 7th Union Armada and current military governor of the Haven system. You have lost 4 cruisers in the past week. The Vrikari are pushing toward the Nixian Gap, which means they are planning to bypass your forward defenses and strike directly at Haven 6. He paused. How am I doing so far? Zorax stared. All of that information was highly classified. Director Javix, explain how this human has access to military intelligence. Jason answered before Javix could speak. I don't have access to your intelligence. I have access to star charts, civilian news reports, and basic knowledge of Vrikari tactics. The rest is, what did my instructors call it? Ah, yes, pattern recognition. Pattern recognition doesn't explain how you knew about classified ship movements. Jason shrugged, a uniquely human gesture that Zorax found oddly disconcerting. The Vrikari have been systematically eliminating your forward scout vessels for the past 3 weeks. That tells me they are preparing for a major offensive. Given their previous strategies and the current deployment of your fleet, the Nixian Gap is the obvious target. And the 4 cruisers? An educated guess. Your expression when you entered told me I was correct. Zorax turned to Javix. He's observant, and that doesn't make him a military genius. Show him, Jason suggested to Javix, the Procyon simulation. Javix nodded and activated a wall display. Another battle scenario appeared, this one unfamiliar to Zorax. This isn't a historical battle, Javix explained. It's a prediction of the Vrikari's next major offensive, based on Jason's analysis. We generated it 2 weeks ago. Zorax watched as the simulation showed Vrikari forces moving through the Nixian Gap, exactly as Jason had just described, and then splitting into 3 battle groups to attack Haven 6 from multiple vectors. This is plausible, Zorax admitted reluctantly, but speculative. Check your latest intelligence reports, Jason suggested. Specifically, Vrikari fleet movements near the Helios cluster. I believe you'll find their scout ships are already positioning themselves exactly as shown here. Zorax accessed his secure datapad, scrolling through the most recent updates from Union intelligence. What he saw made his tentacles go rigid with shock. The Vrikari deployments matched the simulation with uncanny precision. This could still be coincidence, Zorax said, but his voice lacked conviction. There's more, Javix interjected. Jason has developed a comprehensive counter-strategy, one that could not only stop this offensive but potentially turn the tide of the entire war. Jason walked to the display and manipulated the simulation with quick, precise movements of his hands. The Union forces repositioned, employing tactics Zorax had never seen before, tactics that seemed, at first glance, to border on suicidal. But as the simulation played out, he watched in astonishment as the Vrikari forces were systematically isolated and destroyed. You are using our slower capital ships as bait, Zorax realized, studying the movements, drawing their faster attack vessels into a trap. Jason nodded. The Vrikari prioritize efficiency above all else. Their tactical algorithms will identify what appears to be an optimal target and commit fully to destroying it. Predictability can be weaponized against them. And these formations? They violate every principle of Union battle doctrine. Union doctrine was developed against conventional opponents, Jason pointed out. The Vrikari aren't conventional. They don't value individual lives or vessels. Every loss is simply a data point to them, an acceptable cost in pursuit of their objective. To defeat them, Jason continued, You need to present them with scenarios where their own algorithms lead them to destruction. You need to think like them, but with one crucial difference: you need to understand the value of sacrifice in a way they never will. Zorax stared at the human, seeing him with new eyes. You are willing to sacrifice Union ships and crews to win. I'm willing to sacrifice some to save many, Jason corrected, his expression hardening. Just as your commanders did when they decided Earth wasn't strategically important enough to defend. The bitterness in the human's voice was unmistakable, but there was something else there too, a cold, calculated resolve that sent another chill through Zorax's body. If I were to recommend you to the High Council, Zorax said carefully, what exactly would you propose? Jason's eyes narrowed slightly. First, immediate redeployment of the 7th and 3rd Armadas to positions along the Helios transit route. Second, evacuation of all non-essential personnel from Haven 6. Third, I need direct command authority over all Union forces in this sector. Impossible. The Council would never grant that kind of authority to a human? Jason finished for him. Then the Council can explain to their constituents why they chose extinction over setting aside their prejudice. The room fell silent. Even Director Javik seemed taken aback by Jason's bluntness. You said you have a plan that could turn the tide of the entire war, Zorax said finally. What is it? Jason's expression remained neutral. I'll share that with the High Council, and only the High Council. They want to evaluate me? Fine. But I'm not giving away my strategic advantage before I know they are serious. Zorax found himself both impressed and unnerved by the human's confidence. The council session begins in 1 hour. Can you be ready to present by then? I have been ready for 17 years, Admiral, Jason replied, his voice suddenly quiet. Ever since I watched my planet burn. The High Council chamber was a marvel of galactic architecture, a vast circular room with 12 elevated podiums arranged in a perfect circle. Each podium represented one of the founding species of the Galactic Union, and each counselor wore the traditional garments of their homeworld. Under different circumstances, Zorax might have been intimidated by their collective power and wisdom. Today he was simply impatient. Admiral Dunn began Counselor Tress Orn, the ancient Palaxian who served as High Speaker. You have requested this emergency session to present a new strategic initiative. We are listening. Zorax stepped forward. Honored counselors, for 17 years we have fought the Vrikari Dominion. For 17 years we have watched them consume our outer colonies, destroy our fleets, and slaughter our citizens. According to our latest projections, we have perhaps 8 months before our military capabilities are degraded beyond recovery. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Most of the counselors already knew this, but hearing it stated so bluntly was still shocking. However, Zorax continued, I believe we have discovered a potential solution. With your permission, I would like to introduce Director Mila Javix and her associate. At Zorax's signal, the chamber doors opened. Director Javix entered, followed by Jason Vale. The human wore a simple black uniform with no insignia or rank markings, but he walked with quiet confidence, seemingly unaffected by the stares and whispers that followed him across the chamber floor. A human? Counselor Drav Wex of the Saurian Confederation didn't bother to hide his disdain. This is your solution, Admiral? One of the few surviving members of a species too primitive to even defend their own homeworld? Jason showed no reaction to the insult. He simply stood, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. Counselors. Director Javix began. Allow me to introduce Jason Vale. For the past 13 years, he has been part of Project Guardian, a classified research initiative dedicated to developing new strategies against the Vrikari. Mr. Vale has demonstrated unprecedented aptitude for military strategy and tactical analysis. He has successfully predicted Vrikari movements with 94% accuracy and has developed counter-strategies that our simulations suggest could fundamentally alter the course of this conflict. Simulations? Scoffed Counselor Lyra Voss of the Aquarian Alliance. We are supposed to pin our hopes on game scenarios played by a human child. I'm hardly a child, Counselor. Jason spoke for the first time, his voice echoing through the chamber. And these aren't games. The Vrikari are 3 weeks away from launching a major offensive through the Nixian Gap. When that happens, Haven 6 will fall, and with it, your last significant industrial base. The chamber erupted in outrage. How dare you make such claims? This is fear-mongering. Preposterous. Jason waited for the noise to subside. Then, with deliberate movements, he approached the central holographic projector and activated it. The same battle simulation he had shown Zorax appeared in the air above them, Vrikari forces pouring through the Nixian Gap toward Haven 6. This is what's coming, Jason said simply. Your current defensive posture is insufficient to stop it. Your conventional tactics will fail. Your commanders know this, but they are too bound by tradition and doctrine to adapt. And you believe you can do better? Asked Counselor Tressorn, leaning forward with interest. I know I can. There was no boasting in Jason's tone, just absolute certainty. But I need authority to implement my strategies without interference. I need command of the 7th and 3rd Armadas, effective immediately. The chamber exploded again, voices shouting over each other in indignation. Outrageous. A human commanding our forces? We cannot entrust our defenses to an experiment. Counselor Orn raised her hands for silence. When the chamber quieted, she fixed her ancient eyes on Jason. Young human, you ask for extraordinary authority. What assurances can you provide that your strategies will succeed where our most experienced commanders have failed? Jason met her gaze unflinchingly. None, Counselor. War offers no guarantees. I can only tell you that your current path leads to certain defeat, while the path I propose offers a chance, perhaps your only chance for victory. And what is this path? Asked Counselor Orn. Jason glanced at Zorax, then at Director Javix. With respect, Counselor, what I'm about to share must remain in this chamber. No recordings, no transmissions. After a moment of consultation among the counselors, all external communications were shut down. The chamber's security protocols engaged, creating an impenetrable bubble around the proceedings. Jason nodded his thanks, then manipulated the holographic controls again. The display changed, showing a complex star map of Vrikari-controlled space. For 17 years. Jason began, you have been fighting the Vrikari as if they were a conventional enemy, seeking to destroy their fleets, capture their territories, degrade their industrial capacity. But the Vrikari aren't conventional. They are a hive consciousness distributed across millions of individual units. He highlighted a series of locations across the map. These are what your intelligence services have identified as Vrikari command centers. You have targeted them repeatedly, believing that destroying them would disrupt Vrikari operations. But that's fundamentally misunderstanding their nature. The display shifted again, showing the internal architecture of what appeared to be a Vrikari vessel. The Vrikari don't have commanders as we understand them. They have synchronization nodes, biological quantum computers that maintain communication across their vast network. Destroy one, and the others compensate within milliseconds. We are aware of Vrikari resilience, Counselor Wex interjected. That's precisely why conventional tactics have failed. Yes, but you have missed something crucial. Jason zoomed in on a specific component within the Vrikari architecture. This is a frequency modulator. It exists in every Vrikari ship, installation, and drone. Its purpose is to maintain the quantum entanglement that allows their hive mind to function across vast distances. Jason paused, looking around the chamber to ensure he had everyone's attention. The frequency these modulators operate on changes constantly according to a complex algorithm, which is why your attempts to jam their communications have always failed. But there's a pattern to these changes. A mathematical constant that the Vrikari themselves may not even be consciously aware of. How could you possibly know this? Demanded Counselor Voss. Because I have been studying Vrikari communication intercepts for 13 years, Jason replied evenly. The pattern reveals itself if you know where to look. And once you understand the pattern, you can predict the frequency shifts. Zorax finished, beginning to understand. Which means we could potentially disrupt their entire communication network simultaneously. Exactly. Jason nodded. Not just disrupt, collapse. A precisely calibrated pulse transmitted at exactly the right moment could cause a cascading failure throughout their entire system. And what would this accomplish? Asked Counselor Orn. Imagine every Vrikari in the galaxy suddenly isolated, cut off from the collective consciousness that guides their every action. They wouldn't just be confused, they would be individually paralyzed, incapable of independent thought or decision-making. A hushed silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. You are proposing to lobotomize an entire species, Counselor Orn said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm proposing to end a war that has already cost trillions of lives, Jason corrected her. The effect would be temporary, perhaps hours, perhaps days. But during that time, we could strike directly at their core worlds, force a surrender, establish terms that would prevent them from ever threatening the Union again. And if they don't surrender? Asked Counselor Wex. Jason's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then we eliminate the threat permanently. Another silence heavier than the first. How soon could this plan be implemented? Counselor Orn asked. The offensive through the Nixian Gap will begin in approximately 3 weeks, Jason replied. We need to be in position before then. The pulse must be transmitted from multiple locations simultaneously to affect their entire network. It means repositioning key fleet elements immediately. And you require command authority to do this? Yes, your conventional command structure is too slow, too deliberative for what needs to be done. I need the ability to issue orders directly, without debate or committee approval. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. What Jason was asking was unprecedented. No non-founder species had ever been granted such authority, let alone a human. This council needs time to deliberate, Counselor Orn announced. Admiral Dunn, Director Javix, please escort Mr. Vale outside while we discuss this matter privately. In the antechamber outside the council chambers, Jason stood perfectly still, gazing out a viewport at the planet below. Zorax watched him curiously, trying to reconcile the quiet, composed figure before him with the audacious plan he had just proposed. You surprised them, Zorax commented. That rarely happens. Jason didn't turn from the viewport. They are afraid. Not of the plan itself, but of what it represents. And what is that exactly? Change. Now Jason did turn, his dark eyes meeting Zorax's. The Union has existed for over 1,000 years. Its structures, its hierarchies, its very thinking has calcified. The Vrikari recognized that weakness from the beginning. It's why they have been winning. Director Javix, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Jason, what you proposed in there, have you been withholding this strategy from our research team? No. Jason shook his head slightly. The final pieces only came together recently, after Admiral Dunn's visit gave me access to the latest Vrikari communication intercepts. And you are certain it will work? Zorax pressed. Nothing in war is certain, Admiral. But the mathematics support the theory. The Vrikari communication pattern follows a non-random sequence that. The doors to the council chamber slid open, cutting off Jason's explanation. A council aide gestured for them to re-enter. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. The earlier hostility was gone, replaced by a somber resignation that Zorax recognized all too well from his years of military service. It was the look of leaders who had run out of options. Jason Vale, Counselor Orn addressed him directly. This council has deliberated on your proposal and your request for command authority. While many of us have reservations, we cannot ignore the dire circumstances facing the Union. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. By unanimous vote, this council hereby grants you the rank and authority of Supreme Commander of Union Forces, effective immediately. Admiral Dunn will serve as your second in command, and all fleet elements will be placed under your direct control. Murmurs spread through the chamber again, not of outrage this time, but of shock and uncertainty. However, Councillor Orne continued, raising her voice slightly. This authority is provisional and specific to the current crisis. You will provide daily reports to this council. Should your strategies fail to produce the promised results within one standard month, this authority will be revoked. Jason bowed his head slightly. Understood, Counselor. Thank you for your trust. It is not trust, human, Counselor Wex interjected sharply. It is desperation. Do not mistake one for the other. Jason's expression didn't change, but Zorax thought he detected the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of the human's mouth. Of course not, Counselor. Desperation is a powerful motivator. It's what kept me alive when my world burned. It's what drove me to study your enemy more thoroughly than your own commanders have. And now, it's what will save the Galactic Union, whether you trust me or not. Without waiting for a response, Jason turned to Zorax. Admiral, please arrange immediate transport to the Eternal Vigilance. We have a war to win. As they left the council chamber, Zorax couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed a pivotal moment in galactic history. For better or worse, the fate of the Union now rested in the hands of a human war orphan with vengeance in his eyes and a plan that bordered on genocide. What troubled Zorax most, however, was not the plan itself, but the growing suspicion that Jason Vale had been orchestrating this moment for years, patiently waiting, calculating, manipulating events, until the Union had no choice but to give him exactly what he wanted. Supreme Commander of all Union forces. A human. The Vrikari had no idea what was coming for them. The command deck of the Eternal Vigilance had transformed in the 3 weeks since Jason Vale's appointment as Supreme Commander. Gone were the traditional tactical displays and formal command protocols. In their place stood a chaotic array of modified communications equipment, hastily installed workstations, and a massive 3-dimensional map of the Nixian Gap that dominated the center of the room. Zorax Dunn observed the flurry of activity with a mixture of fascination and unease. Union officers of various species worked alongside civilian scientists and engineers, all following the cryptic instructions of the human who now commanded them. Remind me again why we have removed the standardized tactical systems that have served the Union for 3 centuries? Zorax asked, his tentacles twitching with barely concealed irritation. Jason didn't look up from the complex frequency calculations he was reviewing, because those systems were designed to fight conventional wars. This isn't conventional. So you have mentioned. Repeatedly. Zorax moved closer, lowering his voice. The Council is growing anxious. The Vrikari offensive you predicted should have begun 2 days ago. It will begin exactly 37 minutes from now, Jason replied calmly. Their fleet has been gathering just beyond our long-range sensors. They are positioning their synchronization nodes for maximum coverage. Zorax stared at him. How could you possibly know that? Now Jason did look up, his dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the holographic displays. Because if I were commanding their forces, that's what I would do. The Vrikari aren't creative, Admiral. They are methodical. Predictable. That's their weakness. Before Zorax could respond, Sub-Commander Philatan approached, her translucent skin pulsing with urgent patterns. Supreme Commander, we are detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the Nixian Gap, multiple vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Jason nodded, unsurprised. And so it begins. Main viewer, please. The central display shifted to show the vast emptiness of space near the Nixian Gap. At first, there was nothing. Then, like stars blinking into existence, points of light appeared, dozens, then hundreds of them. 427 Vrikari vessels, Jason announced, studying the display. 218 combat cruisers, 193 support craft, 16 capital ships. That's more than twice the size of the fleet our intelligence predicted, Zorax said, his voice tight with alarm. We are outnumbered 3-1. Numbers don't matter, Jason replied, turning to address the entire command deck. What matters is position, timing, understanding your enemy's mind. He raised his voice. All vessels, assume formation Sigma. Communications, begin frequency monitoring as instructed. Across the Union fleet, ships began to move, not into the defensive posture that Union doctrine dictated, but into the seemingly haphazard arrangement Jason had designed. To any conventional tactician, it looked like madness, leaving critical gaps in their defense, positioning capital ships where they were most vulnerable. Zorax fought the urge to countermand the orders. This was exactly what he had feared, a human with no actual combat experience leading them into disaster. Supreme Commander, he said stiffly, perhaps we should reconsider. The Vrikari are transmitting, interrupted one of the communications officers, a young Thalarian whose antennae were vibrating with excitement. Frequencies shifting exactly as predicted. Jason allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. Record everything? Continue monitoring. He turned to Zorax. You were saying, Admiral? Zorax swallowed his objection. Nothing, Supreme Commander. Proceeding as ordered. The Vrikari fleet continued to emerge from faster-than-light travel, their sleek, obsidian vessels arranging themselves into the precise, geometric formations that had become their signature. Even Zorax had to admit there was something unnervingly beautiful about their coordination, hundreds of ships moving as if they were extensions of a single mind. They are scanning our formations, reported another officer, analyzing our deployment. Let them look, Jason said, checking the chronometer on his wrist. In approximately 4 minutes, they'll commit their forward elements to an attack on our exposed flank. They'll identify our capital ships as primary targets, assuming we have made a tactical error. Haven't we? Zorax couldn't help asking. Jason's eyes gleamed. Only if you are thinking like a Union admiral. Look at the positioning from their perspective. Their algorithms prioritize efficiency above all else. Their tactical subroutines will calculate that they can eliminate 40% of our firepower by targeting those 3 vessels. He pointed to the Union battleships positioned at the seemingly vulnerable edge of their formation. And they'll be correct, Zorax pointed out. Yes, but to reach those targets they'll have to pass through this region. Jason indicated a seemingly empty sector of space, which is where the interesting part begins. Right on cue, a section of the Vrikari fleet detached from the main body, approximately 100 vessels moving in perfect synchronization toward the exposed Union flank. Vrikari attack force approaching coordinates Lambda 7, announced Sub-Commander Tan. Exactly as predicted. Jason nodded. Prepare pulse generators. Target frequencies according to calculated sequence. Do not activate until my command. Throughout the Union fleet, specially modified transmitters powered up, devices that had been hastily constructed according to Jason's specifications. They were designed to emit precisely calibrated energy pulses across the frequency spectrum he had identified as critical to Vrikari communication. The Vrikari attack force accelerated, weapons systems charging as they closed in on the vulnerable Union ships. On the tactical display, projected casualty estimates began to climb as the distance shrank. Supreme Commander Zorax urged, if we are going to act, it must be now. Jason held up his hand, eyes fixed on the display, counting down silently. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and calm. Activate pulse generators. All vessels, execute evasive maneuver Theta. Across the Union fleet, the modified transmitters activated simultaneously. Invisible waves of energy surged outward, precisely targeted at the advancing Vrikari vessels. To the naked eye, nothing seemed to happen. The Vrikari continued their approach, weapons still charged. Then, subtly at first, their perfect formation began to falter. One ship drifted slightly off course. Another slowed unexpectedly. A third fired its thrusters in the wrong direction. What's happening to them? Zorax asked, staring at the display in disbelief. Cognitive disruption, Jason replied. We are interfering with their hive communication. Each vessel is now operating in isolation, without the collective intelligence that guides them. The individual Vicari are experiencing something they have never faced before, the need to make decisions independently. As they watched, the disruption spread. The precise geometric formation dissolved into chaos as Vicari vessels collided with one another, fired weapons at random, or simply drifted, seemingly paralyzed by indecision. Union vessels commenced targeting of disabled Vicari ships, Jason ordered. Priority on their synchronization nodes. The Union fleet responded with devastating efficiency, concentrating their fire on the now vulnerable Vicari. Within minutes, the attacking force had been reduced to drifting wreckage. Status of the main Vicari fleet? Jason asked. Holding position, reported Sub-Commander Tan. They appear to be confused. They have lost contact with their attack force, Jason explained. The hive mind is trying to process what happened. This is the critical moment. He turned to the communications officer. Extend pulse frequency to maximum range. Target the entire Vicari fleet. The officer hesitated. Sir, that would require more power than our generators can safely. Divert power from weapons and shields if necessary, Jason interrupted. This is our only chance to affect their entire command structure simultaneously. Zorax stepped forward. Supreme Commander, that leaves our fleet defenseless if your strategy fails. It won't fail. Jason's voice was iron. Execute the order. The command deck fell silent as the communications officer made the necessary adjustments. Power levels throughout the Union fleet fluctuated as energy was redirected to the pulse generators. The lights dimmed briefly on the eternal vigilance as systems strained under the demand. Pulse ready, Supreme Commander, the officer reported. Jason took a deep breath. Activate. A wave of energy, invisible but immensely powerful, surged from the Union fleet toward the waiting Vicari. And for several long seconds, nothing seemed to happen. The Vicari fleet remained in formation, apparently unaffected. Then, like a string of lights losing power one by one, the Vicari vessels began to go dark. Propulsion systems failed. Weapons powered down. Communications ceased. By the ancient stars, whispered Zorax, it's actually working. Across the command deck, officers and crew members stared in disbelief as the mighty Vicari fleet, the terror of the galaxy for 17 years, drifted helplessly before them. Union vessels, advance and surround the Vicari fleet, Jason ordered. Maintain pulse transmission. Prepare boarding parties. Boarding parties? Zorax repeated. What for? We need to capture at least one of their command ships intact, Jason explained. Need to access their central database. That's how we'll locate their homeworld. Zorax's tentacles curled in shock. Their homeworld? No one has ever discovered the location of the Vicari homeworld. Their ships self-destruct before revealing that information, because their hive mind commands them to, Jason pointed out. But right now, that connection is severed. We have a window of opportunity that won't come again. As the Union fleet moved to surround the disabled Vicari vessels, Zorax studied the human standing calmly at the center of the command deck. There was no jubilation in Jason's expression, no satisfaction at seeing his strategy succeed so spectacularly. Just cold, methodical determination. You have been planning this for years, Zorax said quietly, so only Jason could hear. This wasn't some recent breakthrough. You knew exactly what you were going to do long before you ever met me or the High Council. Jason met his gaze evenly. I have had 17 years to think about this moment, Admiral. 17 years to understand the enemy that destroyed my world and killed my family. Did you really believe I spent all that time simply running simulations in Director Javix's laboratory? What exactly are you planning? Zorax demanded. The Council authorized a defensive action, not an assault on the Vicari homeworld. The Council authorized me to end this war, Jason corrected him. That's precisely what I intend to do. Before Zorax could respond, Sub-Commander Tan approached again. Supreme Commander, boarding parties report success. They have secured the Vicari command vessel. The crew appears to be incapacitated. Excellent. Jason nodded. Tell them to locate the central navigation database and transmit its contents directly to my secure terminal. Yes, sir. Tan hesitated. Sir, there's something else. The boarding parties report that the Vrikari, they are dying. Without the hive connection, their biological functions are failing rapidly. For the first time, Jason's composure slipped slightly. A flicker of something, surprise, regret, crossed his features before the mask fell back into place. Understood. Tell them to work quickly. Zorax stared at him. You didn't know this would happen. I knew disrupting their network would incapacitate them, Jason admitted. The fatal physiological dependency wasn't anticipated. You have just turned a tactical victory into genocide, Zorax said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jason's expression hardened. They destroyed Earth. 6 billion humans. Men, women, children, my parents. Every person I ever knew before the age of 8. Was that not genocide, Admiral? 2 atrocities don't balance the scales of justice. Justice? Jason laughed bitterly. This isn't about justice, it's about survival. If we allow any Vrikari to survive, they'll rebuild. They'll adapt. They'll return stronger than before. The Union will fall, and every species within it will share humanity's fate. A chime sounded from Jason's terminal. The navigation data, he said, turning away from Zorax. Let's see what secrets the Vrikari have been hiding. As Jason worked at his terminal, analyzing the transmitted data, Zorax struggled with his growing sense of unease. The victory they had achieved was unprecedented. In a single engagement, they had neutralized a Vrikari fleet that had threatened to overwhelm the Union's defenses. By any military standard, Jason Vale was a genius, perhaps the greatest tactical mind in galactic history. But the cost, the complete annihilation of the Vrikari forces, the planned assault on their homeworld, it went beyond warfare into something darker. I have it, Jason announced suddenly, looking up from his terminal. Coordinates for the Vrikari central hub, what we might call their homeworld, although it's actually an artificial construct. A massive space station at the center of a binary star system in the Cygnus arm. He transferred the data to the main tactical display, showing a massive spherical structure surrounded by thousands of smaller installations. This is the heart of the Vrikari Dominion. Their entire species originated from this single location. Their hive mind is anchored here. How far? Asked Zorax, military curiosity temporarily overriding his ethical concerns. 3 days at maximum faster than light speed, Jason replied. But we won't need to send the entire fleet. A single vessel carrying a modified pulse generator should be sufficient. You are proposing to extend the communication disruption to their central hub. Jason nodded. Once their primary synchronization node is disabled, the entire species will be affected simultaneously. The war ends in a single stroke, and every Vrikari in the galaxy dies. Zorax finished for him. The command deck had gone silent again, officers and crew members exchanging uncertain glances. What had begun as a defensive action had somehow transformed into a plan for the complete eradication of an enemy species. Jason sensed the shift in mood. I understand your hesitation, he said, addressing the entire deck. You have been fighting this war for 17 years, losing friends, family, comrades. Now victory is within your grasp, and you are wondering if the cost is too high. He paused, looking around at the assembled Union personnel. Let me ask you this, if the Vrikari could have prevented this war by eliminating humanity before we became a threat, would they have hesitated? Did they show any mercy at Earth? At the Rigel colonies? At any of the hundreds of worlds they have consumed in their relentless expansion? No one answered. No one needed to. The Vrikari's brutality was legendary. They never took prisoners, never negotiated, never showed the slightest concern for the billions they had slaughtered. I was 8 years old when they destroyed my world, Jason continued, his voice softer now. I watched from an evacuation ship as Earth burned. I felt the collective grief of the few thousand humans who survived. I promised myself that someday I would make the Vrikari understand what they had taken from us. He turned back to the tactical display, studying the image of the Vrikari central hub. But this isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring that no other species suffers our fate. The Vrikari cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be contained. They cannot change their nature. They expand. They consume. They destroy. That is their purpose. The High Council must be consulted, Zorax insisted. A decision of this magnitude— There's no time, Jason cut him off. The Vrikari at their central hub will detect the loss of their fleet soon. They'll adapt their communication frequencies. Our advantage will be lost. Then I must formally protest this action, Zorax declared. As second in command of this fleet and representative of the High Council, I cannot sanction the deliberate extinction of an entire species without proper authorization. Jason studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. Your protest is noted, Admiral Dunn, and respected. You are acting according to your principles, as am I. He turned to Sub-Commander Tan. Prepare my personal shuttle. Equip it with the most powerful pulse generator we have. I'll undertake this mission myself. Sir? Tan's translucent skin pulsed with confusion. Alone? Meln? Alone, Jason confirmed. No one else should have to bear the responsibility for what must be done. Zorax stared at him. You are going to attack the Vrikari central hub, the heart of their dominion, with a single shuttle? That's suicide. Probably, Jason agreed, with a small, grim smile. But I don't plan on surviving this war, Admiral. I never did. The realization hit Zorax like a physical blow. You have been planning your own death all along. I have been planning to finish what started 17 years ago when the Vrikari destroyed my world, Jason corrected him. What happens to me afterward is irrelevant. I can't allow this, Zorax said, straightening to his full height. Guards detain Supreme Commander Vale. This mission is suspended pending Council review. The Union security officers looked uncertainly between Zorax and Jason, clearly conflicted about who to obey. Jason sighed. I was hoping to avoid this, Admiral. He raised his voice. Computer, recognize Vale, Jason. Authorization code Alpha Omega 739. Implement protocol firewall. Throughout the eternal vigilance, security barriers activated, sealing off sections of the ship from one another. On the command deck, force fields sprang into existence around Jason, protecting him from the security officers. What have you done? Zorax demanded. Ensured that I can complete my mission, Jason replied calmly. Director Javix gave me emergency override codes when I was first brought into Project Guardian. She believed in what I was trying to accomplish. She wouldn't have supported genocide. She understood what was at stake better than anyone. Jason moved toward the exit, the force field moving with him. The security protocols will reset in 1 hour. By then, I'll be gone. The fleet remains under your command, Admiral Dunn. I suggest you use it to protect Haven 6 in case I fail. Zorax pressed against the force field, his tentacles splaying uselessly against the energy barrier. Jason, listen to me. Whatever the Vrikari did to your world, to your family, this isn't the answer. Exterminating them won't bring back what you have lost. For a moment, something flickered in Jason's eyes, a hint of the wounded child he had once been, still carrying the trauma of watching his world burn. I know that, Admiral, but it might prevent others from experiencing the same loss. Sometimes there are no good choices in war, only necessary ones. With that, he was gone, leaving Zorax and the command crew trapped behind security barriers, unable to stop what was about to unfold. 3 days later, Zorax stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance, staring out at the stars. The security protocols had reset as Jason had promised, but by then his shuttle had already jumped to faster-than-light travel, beyond their ability to track or intercept. The Union fleet had returned to Haven 6, bearing news of their unexpected victory over the Vrikari forces. The High Council was still debating how to respond to Jason's unauthorized mission to the Vicari Central Hub. Some councilors demanded his immediate arrest for exceeding his authority. Others argued that his tactical genius had saved the Union and he deserved their gratitude, not their condemnation. Zorax had his own opinions, but he kept them to himself. The truth was more complex than either side understood. Admiral. Sub-Commander Tan's voice interrupted his thoughts. We are receiving an unusual transmission. It's from Supreme Commander Vale's shuttle. Zorax turned sharply. Put it through, now. Jens. A moment later, Jason's face appeared on a nearby display. He looked tired, with several days' growth of beard shadowing his face, but his eyes were as intense as ever. Admiral Dunn, he began, his voice slightly distorted by the vast distance. If you are receiving this, then my mission was at least partially successful. I have reached the Vicari Central Hub. The image shifted to show a massive structure floating in space, a sphere composed of countless interconnected segments, surrounded by a swarm of smaller vessels. It's incredible, Jason's voice continued over the image. The Vicari originated here, in this artificial world. Their entire evolution occurred within its confines. They have never known a natural environment. They never felt wind or rain, never seen a real sky. The image shifted back to Jason's face. I'm transmitting these observations for the Union archives. The Vicari are unique in galactic history, a species that developed not on a planetary surface but in the vacuum of space itself. They deserve to be remembered, even as they must be stopped. Zorax felt a chill at those words. Can we respond to him? He asked Tan. She shook her head. It's a one-way transmission, sir. Recorded and sent via quantum burst. He can't hear us. Jason continued, his expression growing more solemn. I have modified the pulse generator to affect their entire central hub. Once activated, it should disrupt their primary synchronization node. Based on what we observed during the battle, this will likely result in the complete biological shutdown of all Vicari throughout the galaxy. He paused, looking directly into the camera as if he could see Zorax through it. I want the record to show that I take full responsibility for this action. The High Council, Admiral Dunn, the Union military, none of them authorized or supported what I'm about to do. The burden is mine alone. Zorax found himself holding his breath, watching as Jason prepared to commit an act that would forever alter the course of galactic history. However, Jason continued, surprising him. After studying the Vicari Central Hub more closely, I have discovered something unexpected. Their primary synchronization node isn't just a communication center, it's a repository of their entire history, culture, and collective knowledge. To destroy it would be to erase not just their physical existence, but everything they were or might have become. His expression changed subtly, the cold determination softening into something more thoughtful. The Vicari are monsters by our standards. They have committed atrocities beyond counting. But they are also a unique form of intelligence, with their own evolutionary path. Their hive consciousness represents a type of existence we can barely comprehend. Zorax leaned closer to the screen, hardly believing what he was hearing. So I have made a modification to my plan, Jason explained. Instead of destroying their synchronization network, I'm going to rewrite it. The pulse generator has been recalibrated to introduce new parameters into their collective consciousness, concepts like empathy, restraint, coexistence, values they never evolved naturally because they never needed them in their isolated artificial world. That's impossible, Zorax whispered, though Jason couldn't hear him. You can't rewrite the fundamental nature of an entire species. As if in response, Jason smiled slightly. Is it possible to change the basic nature of a species through external intervention? I don't know, but I believe it's worth trying before resorting to extinction. The Union was founded on the principle that different forms of intelligence could learn to coexist despite their differences. Perhaps. It's time to extend that principle even to our enemies. The image flickered as Jason moved away from the camera, making final adjustments to equipment just out of view. The modified pulse will activate in approximately 3 minutes. I have positioned my shuttle close enough to their central hub to ensure maximum effect, but that means I won't be able to escape the backlash. The Vrikari defenses will target me as soon as they detect the pulse. He returned to the center of the frame, his expression calm and resolute. If this works, the Vrikari will cease their aggression against the Union. They'll withdraw to their own territory to process the changes to their collective consciousness. It might take years, decades even, before they are ready to engage with other species again. But when they do, it will be as something new, neither the mindless consumers they were, nor the synthetic imitation of other species' values that I'm attempting to introduce. Something uniquely their own, but compatible with galactic civilization. And if it fails? Zorax asked the screen, knowing there would be no answer. But Jason, as if anticipating the question, nodded slightly. If it fails, if they cannot be changed, then I have included a secondary protocol in the pulse generator, the Deadman switch, activated by my biological termination. If I die, the pulse converts to its original purpose, disrupting their synchronization network permanently. Either way, the war ends today. He checked something off-screen, then straightened, looking directly into the camera one last time. Admiral Dunn, I know you disapproved of my methods, but I hope you understand my intentions. I wasn't seeking revenge for Earth. I was trying to ensure that no other world would suffer the same fate. His voice softened. To the High Council and the people of the Galactic Union, you took in a traumatized human child and gave him purpose. For that, I am grateful. I hope my final act serves you well. He reached for something off-screen, presumably the activation control for the pulse generator. Transmission ends. Veil out. The screen went dark, leaving Zorax staring at his own reflection. Sir? Sub-Commander Tan's voice was unusually gentle. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive energy surge from the direction of the Vrikari central hub. Some kind of wave propagating through space. The pulse, Zorax said quietly. Yes, sir. And there's no sign of Commander Vale's shuttle. Zorax nodded slowly, still looking at his reflection in the blank screen. Of course not. He never intended to return. For several long moments, the observation deck was silent. Then one of the junior officers monitoring communication channels spoke up, his voice tight with excitement. Admiral, we are receiving reports from throughout Union space. Vrikari vessels are withdrawing, all of them. They are abandoning occupied territories and returning to their own space. Another officer joined in. Confirmation from the Regal sector, sir. Vrikari forces have ceased all offensive operations. They are sending out communication signals. Not attacks, not threats. Just signals. What kind of signals? Zorax asked, turning from the blank screen at last. The officer looked up, his expression bewildered. As far as we can tell, sir, they are asking questions. 1 year later. Zorax Dunn stood before the High Council once again, but this time as the newly appointed Supreme Commander of Union Forces. The chamber looked much as it had a year before, but the mood could not have been more different. Gone was the desperate resignation of a civilization on the brink of collapse. In its place was the cautious optimism of recovery. Supreme Commander, began Councillor Tressorn, your quarterly report on the Vrikari situation, please. Zorax activated the central display, showing the new boundaries between Union space and Vrikari territory. The situation remains stable, Councillor. The Vrikari continue to observe the buffer zone established by the armistice. There have been no incursions or provocations for 300 standard days. And the communication attempts? Asked Councillor Wex, considerably less hostile than he had been during Jason Vale's appearance before the Council. Ongoing, Zorax replied. Our xenolinguist reports significant progress in establishing a common frame of reference. The Vakari communication patterns have fundamentally changed. They are no longer the uniform, algorithmic transmissions we saw during the war. There's variety, nuance, even what our experts believe might be individual variation between different Vakari vessels. Individual variation? Counselor Orn leaned forward, intrigued. You are suggesting the hive mind has fragmented? Not fragmented, Zorax corrected. Evolved. Our scientists believe that Jason Vale's pulse did exactly what he intended. It introduced new parameters into their collective consciousness. They are still a unified species, but with a greater capacity for individual thought within the collective. And what do they want? Asked Counselor Voss of the Aquarian Alliance. Have they explained why they attacked the Union in the first place? That's the most fascinating part, Zorax said, changing the display to show a series of translated Vakari communications. Based on what we have been able to decipher, the Vakari didn't see their expansion as aggression. Their collective consciousness experienced the galaxy as a single organism, with themselves as its brain. Other species were simply resources to be incorporated, like cells being absorbed into a body. And now? Prompted Counselor Orn. Now they are, struggling, Zorax admitted. Vale's pulse forced them to recognize other species as separate, autonomous consciousnesses with their own right to exist. It's a completely alien concept to them, contradicting their entire evolutionary history. They have withdrawn to process this new understanding. Do they pose a future threat? Counselor Wex demanded. Unknown, Zorax answered honestly. But I believe Jason Vale was correct in his assessment. When the Vakari re-emerge, they will be something new, neither what they were nor what we might wish them to be. But perhaps something that can exist alongside us in this galaxy. The council chambers fell silent as the counselors contemplated this possibility. After 17 years of brutal war, the concept of peaceful coexistence with the Vakari seemed almost unimaginable. And what of Jason Vale? Asked Counselor Orn finally. The official record still lists him as missing in action, presumed dead. But there are rumors. All evidence indicates that Supreme Commander Vale perished when he activated the pulse at the Vakari Central Hub, Zorax stated formally. His shuttle was destroyed by Vakari defenses seconds after the pulse initiated. There were no survivors. This was the official position of Union Military Command, and Zorax maintained it without hesitation before the Council. What he didn't mention was the anomalous transmission that had been detected 6 months after Vale's presumed death, a brief quantum burst containing only a simple text message, but still watching, still learning, still human. The message had been encrypted using Project Guardian protocols known only to Jason Vale and Director Javix. Its origin point had been impossible to trace, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Supreme Commander Vale gave his life to end a war that claimed trillions, Zorax continued. Whatever one thinks of his methods, his sacrifice deserves our respect. Indeed, agreed Counselor Orn. The Council has voted to award him the Star of Union posthumously, our highest honor for service to galactic civilization. He would have appreciated that, Zorax said, though he strongly suspected that Jason Vale would have found the gesture meaningless. The human had never sought recognition or glory, only the completion of the mission he had set for himself as a child watching his world burn. As the council session concluded, Zorax found himself once again on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance, gazing out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the visible universe, the Vakari were adapting to their new consciousness, grappling with concepts they had never needed before: empathy, restraint, and coexistence. And somewhere, perhaps, Jason Vale was watching, waiting to see if his great gamble had paid off. Not the annihilation of an enemy, but something far more difficult: their redemption. Zorax didn't know if such a transformation was truly possible. But in a galaxy where a human war orphan could rise to become Supreme Commander of the Galactic Union, perhaps anything was. To unexpected outcomes, Zorax murmured to the stars, raising a ceremonial cup in salute. And to the future we never anticipated. The war was over. What came next was unwritten, a new chapter in galactic history that would be shaped by choices rather than inevitability. And in that uncertainty lay both danger and hope, just as Jason Vale had intended all along.